to another friend of mine about this, and I said, well, maybe someone did shoot him. Isn't that possible? And the guy says, no, it's impossible. I said, well, why do you say it's impossible? He said, I'll tell you why. And maybe you as an anthropologist might appreciate this more than it took me a little while. He says, you have to understand, primitive people, and even peoples up until, within the past couple of centuries, certainly, wherever people are hand-making their weapons, this is a rather time-consuming process. And these things are valuable like gold would be to somebody now. You have a knife that you've had to spend a long time, carving off of obsidian or whatever, or an arrowhead or a spearhead or an axe. You don't leave that in a body unless you're killed too. Were there a bunch of dead people found in this area? I said, no, just this guy. He says, well, had he been shot by somebody, they would have retrieved the arrowhead. So your friend's explanation here, that he fell back on an arrow. So then I go back online, and National Geographic, I think, had another thing on this, and they showed the artifacts. There was a quiver, and there was a broken arrow.
Fascinating. I understand why you go goofy. Why are you the U.S. official media representative? And talk a little bit about how this came to be.
Well, I had, as I told you, I first was introduced to this in 79. I tell at least in the film. In 86, I got the first documentation in 88, 87, 88, when I had found some scientific information on A-bomb testing that I had already read that was a new discovery. That got me deeper into information. I met a guy who was representing the case. We made a video on it called The Pleiadian Connection. I decided to do my own presentations at that time because as good as this guy was, and he was great, he was adding stuff that wasn't there, and it was just not accurate. So over the years, starting in 87 or 88, I was doing my own presentations, and then around 2000, I joined up a little study group on this material in L.A., and one of the people who was heading up the group said, well, why don't you go to Switzerland and meet Billy and people there? You can become a little more involved if you want. They're kind of nice. So I went over in 2000 for the first time and met Meier. And at that time, I wasn't trying to get anything so-called official going. I went back I went back each year. So 2001, I was back 2002. Somewhere around there, I asked if I could do, I said, I want to put together a video on the scientific information in this case. I think this is the heart of it. And they said, well, why don't you just wait a little bit? It's not the time right now. I said, well, okay, fine. The next year, they said, well, go for it if you want to. So that's when I put out, a year later, my DVD came out, 2004. And when I was over there, I said, I really want to represent you officially, and by that I mean this. I want to take your information as you have it in your approved form and publish it, present it, in lectures, put it on my website, talk about it in interviews, providing a couple conditions are agreeable to you. And they said, well, what are those conditions? Number one, I can agree, I have the right to disagree. If I don't agree with something, I can express that. And they said, well, of course. Number two, that if I don't know if something is true, I'm not going to say that it's true just because, I like this case. They said, naturally. I said, number three, you don't pay me and I don't pay you. And they said, well, that's fine. In particular reason? I said, sure. Because people are going to accuse me of being in it for $1 anyhow, and I love doing this, and I just as soon do it for free. And, of course, if people buy my CDs or DVDs or something, I'm not going to turn that down. That'll help me. And they said, well, of course, let's just keep it clean. So we wrote up a contract to that effect. It's just nice and clean.
Got it. Although, I think there's a lot of confusion around you having an arrangement with him, not confusion around that, but you are, in fact, having commercial products based on the packaging of this knowledge for the public. There's nothing wrong with that. It still takes work, it takes time, it takes money, it takes energy, it takes focus, it takes you away from other things. There's nothing wrong with having commercial value for what you've brought together of his material. I don't see a problem with that.
I agree with you, but here's the thing. First of all, it wasn't even until I started to represent their first book that was not published by them, but the English language version of a book. I represented that, I think, starting in 2001. But the point was that I was going to put up any and everything for free because basically they put their stuff out for free. Now, they have books, too, that you can buy. Meier has written 46 books. And there are things that people have sat there to compile, and they have to pay their publishing. They are a true Swiss nonprofit. I mean, what goes in goes out, and they keep it clean. And I see their books every year. I go to the meeting, and they actually put them up on a big screen for everybody to examine.
Do you read their books?
Yeah, because they do an accounting. They show all the money that came in and everything it was allocated for. And this is very above board. The Swiss are, as you may imagine, rather fastidious with their laws pertaining to anything financial, and nonprofit groups don't just fly by there. From what I understand, they're under scrutiny. Plus, Meier being under a certain watchful eye, there are those that would love to trip him up for anything. So they are very careful. They operate as a true nonprofit. They do charity. They all that stuff. But the point being about the selling of stuff, as you correctly said, anything that we do sell has been put together and paid for either by me or somebody else, and it's voluntary. Nobody has to buy it. And, for instance, there are books that are out of print now that are collector's items that we managed to put into ebook form at a fraction of the cost of what the remaining hard copies are. Actually, it sells for the same price as the original book, whatever. And I even have a thing on my website, name your own price. It sounds a little funny, but I know people can't afford everything, and if we can afford to sell at somebody's preferred price, we do it because we want people, if they want that additional stuff, fine, we'll help you out. I can tell you, I'm over retirement age here, and in this economy, there is not a lot to do, and I spend 6 to 10 hours a day gladly doing this because it's my passion and because I feel it's important that people have the opportunity, that I'll make noise and I'll irritate people to get them to look. And past that point, it's just exactly what you and I were saying about. This is whatever you do with anything in your life, that's your responsibility. And there's nothing to believe. If you get to a point where you accept the possibility that, well, they might be right about that other thing because they've been so right before, well, that's fine. But it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how does this and the spiritual teaching contained within this case, how does it help you in your own personal life, and how does that work interlinking with other people who are, whatever their belief systems or anything else, on a positively intended course to help create a better, saner, safer, cleaner, healthier world.
All right, stand by now. Talk a little bit about, if you would, the distinction that Billy makes between the Pleiades and the Pleiaren.
Sure. Pleiadian is a term that Meier was given early in 1975. They said to him, you're going to refer to us as Pleiadians. And he says, well, why would I do that when you're really Pleiaren people? What's Pleiadian about? And they said, well, what is going to happen after you start to publish your material, from here on, it will slowly gain a recognition in the world. It'll come out, you'll have things in different languages, people will translate. And then you will start to find that there will be people that will be making the claim that they are in contact with Pleiadians, they are channeling the Pleiadians, their boyfriends and girlfriends are Pleiadians, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, there is no life in the Pleiades, and even your scientists know that. So these people will be self-identifying as liars. When we are ready to complete our mission here, we will tell you, then please, you just published that this was, the screen name, and we set up this mechanism to put that out. Now, again, we're talking about a guy that people say, well, what do you mean? Nobody's in touch with extraterrestrials, whatever they call themselves, blah, 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 blah. But that's simply the information of the case. They said, of course there's no Pleiadians because there's no life in the Pleiades. We don't live in this Pleiades that you see in your night sky. We are living 80 light years beyond that in the direction of it, but that's a whole other story, and we are Pleiaren people, and that is what it is. But you will find then that there will be a proliferation of information. If we said that we are the Pleiaren and you published that at this time, then you'd have all these people claiming that they were in touch with the Pleiaren. This will be a subtle distinction for those that want to make it.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. They're not stupid. Now, the thing is, they're not all knowing either, and at some point I could regale you with some things about why their approach to the Carter administration in 1979 resulted in the Carter administration declining contact with them.
Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Oh, did I set that up a little?
You certainly did. It sounds like you're hosting this show, but go for it. I feel like I'm on your wild ride, but what the heck? Let's do it.
Well,
let's do it. You're pretty savvy. Let's do it.
You see, you're a good host, and you're letting it appear that I'm running something.
I think you are, but you know what? It's a wild ride. Let's do it. Then I do want to talk to you about Wendell Stevens.
Okay, shall I do the contact thing?
Yeah, go ahead. You planted the seed. Go ahead.
Okay, so a few years ago when I was with Billy, I said to him, Billy, I don't think these players are really understood.